Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. I'm Richard Fields. On the program today we have Tyler Kuski, the chairman of the Libertarian Party of El Dorado County, and John Cameron, the author of Re-Kill, Rewire, and a development officer at PLF, Pacific Legal Foundation. Welcome to the show. New Hampshire has passed a jury nullification law. What does that mean? It means juries must be informed before deliberation that they have the right to find a defendant not guilty if the enforcement of a bad law would lead to injustice. Now that's finding somebody not guilty even though in fact they committed the so-called crime. They can find them not guilty anyway if they think the law is bad, is essentially what that means. John, is this a kind of a revolutionary thing, or is this going back to the origins of common law in the United States?
Well, I think it's a wonderful thing, and I quite frankly wasn't aware of it until right before the show. How do we get that law on the books in California? Because think about drug laws that are on the books, victimless crimes, and I don't want to include prostitution in that because as it is in our country right now, it certainly isn't victimless. But somebody selling pot, enough to keep somebody high for a week to another person, is there a law against it yet? But what is the injustice, especially, I don't know how many black youth there are in New Hampshire, but our drug laws are grossly and obscenely unjust, and have the greatest negative impact on the young black people, young black men in this country. And so if a jury was informed of this anywhere, and they thought about the injustice of sending someone to prison because this might be their third felony for doing something that, if it was potatoes, would it be illegal? No. So why should marijuana? I mean, basically it's the same thing. Well, it's close to the same thing.
They're both vegetables.
Yes, or
as opposed
fruit,
to minerals
They're both plant life. So I think it's a wonderful thing. My hat's off to New Hampshire if I was wearing a hat, and I would just say yes, because that's the way it should be. Justice should be above the law.
It's interesting. It wasn't when the country was founded back in the 19th century, late 18th century. There was jury nullification. Jury nullification was the standard procedure, and judges did not say, well, I think they actually said that you can judge the law as well as the facts. And one of the primary reasons that prohibition was repealed, the constitutional amendment that repealed prohibition, one of the reasons that took place is because the dry laws were nobody could get a conviction because people would go to trial for bootlegging or for possession of booze or whatever, and no jury would convict them. All the evidence in the world could be brought to bear in front of the court, and the jury would come back and say, we don't like the law, not guilty. And that's why, in the aftermath of that, that's why government lawyers, prosecutors said, we need to fix this because it's making our life much more difficult. We can't enforce unjust laws as well as we should be able to. So what they did is they wrote laws that instruct judges to say that your job, Mr. Juror, is to judge only the facts. You have no say on judging the righteousness or the reasonableness or the justice involved in the law. I'll take care of that. I'll handle the law. You just worry about the facts in the case. And of course, there was an organization called FIJA, Fully Informed Jury Association, founded by a guy up in Montana. I think it's still in existence, still kicking around. Obviously, they have their first win in New Hampshire. There's a long and glorious history of people who have been picketing and pamphleting in front of courthouses, handing out Fully Informed Jury Association pamphlets in front of county courthouses all over the country, saying to potential jurors that, hey, you got a right to judge the law as well as the facts in this case, And those people have been subject to arrest. Many of them have been arrested and charged with interfering, meddling with justice or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what the charge is, but now
interfering with the world order.
Yeah, and now in New Hampshire, that's old news. Juries must be told by the judge, or at least not told by the judge, that they can't judge the law. They're able to do so.
Applause to New Hampshire.
Actually, interestingly enough, when I was in high school, there was, Ella County had a program called Teen Court.
Yeah.
So when teenagers got in trouble, they can go in front of a judge, but you actually had a teenage jury.
Okay.
And if you were involved in student government or anything, whatever reason you were able to serve on the teen jury, I did that when I was I did actually while I was 18, but I was still able to, since I was in high school, I was still able to get in. And I remember there was if you're on the teen court program, if you're in trouble for something, you have to plead guilty. You can't plead innocent, and you have to get a sentence, no matter what. And that's one thing they told the jurors is you have to give them something. You can't let them go innocent. There's no innocent. So by default, they're guilty. But I remember there was an instance, I can't really talk too much about the case, but there was an instance where I felt that it was really just off of stupidity. It wasn't that they were breaking the law because they were trying to break the law, but they were just breaking the law because they weren't intelligent enough to know that that was the law. And what we were able to do was actually change, because we were able to actually pick out the sentence, and the judge would have ultimately choose the sentence. We were able to encourage the judge what the sentence was, and what came down to it was writing an essay on what they did, was how stupid it was that they did. So there was ways to counter that and stuff, but it was interesting how you had to plead guilty. I always thought that was kind of,
like French law, guilty until proven innocent.
Talk about stupid, breaking the law because you're stupid. It goes back to Harvey Silverglade, who wrote the book 3 Felonies a Day. And he did some, fairly respectable. He's a, professor at Chicago or someplace like that, maybe Harvard, I can't remember. But anyway, he wrote a book called 3 Felonies a Day, which purports to statistically prove, or intimate at least, that on average each of us commits 3 felonies a day.
Is that all?
Unknowingly. And if you think about it, if you speed over a certain number of times, if you speed once, it's a misdemeanor. But if the third time that you speed, or something, or a fourth, I'm not sure where it turns into a felony, but it eventually turns into a felony. Mm-hmm. And hell, I commit 3 felonies a day just driving, because I speed more than once per day.
Yeah, it's at least 3.
Not to mention any of the other, any number of other things that we each of us do in our daily lives. The regulatory law in this country is such that you can't plow a field without worrying about whether you're breaking a law. You can't dam a creek without worrying about whether you're breaking a law. There's any number.
You can't enter a business without worrying that you're breaking a law.
You can't open a business without worrying about whether or not you're.
And if Trump had his way, you can't not rat out your neighbors without worrying about breaking the law.
Point is that jury nullification would lead to innocent verdicts for a lot of people who were just going about their business, didn't realize that there was a law, and it would make ignorance of a law actually a defense for the first time, in some cases.
In some cases.
If the jury thought so.
If it was
the jury thinks
minor, or if nobody else was harmed.
Yeah.
So as a
it's a panacea for victimless crimes or consensual crimes.
One would hope. I would hope that our representative of the Libertarian Party here would take that flag and start running with it. I would like to see. Talk to me about it. Ping me with an email. We'll talk about maybe a grassroots effort to get such a law in the state of Nanny-fornia.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, I just made that up. I like that. Nanny-fornia.
Record cold temperatures in Vostok, Antarctica. Antarctic snowpack has hit a new record of thickness. I thought we were having a global warming problem. No wonder global warmists want to make climate warming denial a criminal offense.
Well, but no. See, they haven't called it global warming in a while. Well, they call it global warming on hot days. They call it climate change on cold days. And they call it climate chaos on days where there's anything bad. So the global warming thing is kind of old hat. But, if you cherry pick your data, which is what the climate people have done for years, they place the stations in heat sinks. They pick the stations that they want to report. They don't use stations that give them data that might mess up their models. So, the fact that Antarctic ice pack thickness hits a new record is no shock to me. It was last year, a year before, 2 years ago, where the Danube froze solid, not solid, but Danube froze, and that hasn't happened in 300 years. We're overdue for a new ice age. It's really, this whole climate thing is really the watermelon. It's green on the outside, red on the inside. It's a process, and people in the UN have been quoted as saying that this will allow us to change the capitalist system. They've stated that that's what they want to do. It's not about polar bears. The polar bear population is going through the roof. Despite the fact that many camera people are trying to take pictures of them drowning. Maybe they're feeding them while they're trying to catch this picture. So the fact that it's all bunk, it's never been science. It's always been politics.
Well, I think that either way, you're going to have people cherry picking the data from both sides. Even from a libertarian perspective, you can still be pro-environment. There's nothing wrong with wanting to take care of the environment or caring about, polar ice caps. There's nothing wrong with that. I completely think that's ignorant for us to go around saying, yelling in the face of people who believe in global warming that, it's a lie, whatever, because then they're just going to retaliate and say, call us science deniers or whatever and stuff. It should just be a normal ethic that we need to incorporate in our lives is to take care of the environment. It has nothing to do with having the government. We shouldn't necessarily have the government looking, because the government's horrible at doing things. I actually did a paper when I was in college about how actually our current government has caused more pollution than any corporation in the United States combined. They've actually literally, because they're exempt from all their pollution laws.
They're exempt from, yeah. I mean, you look at all the Superfund sites are former government munitions, weapons, repair facilities, and they've done that for you. I absolutely agree. But I don't have a problem with science. I don't have a problem with the environment. I love the outdoors. I'm outside all the time. I take care of it. I pick up other people's garbage. I think that when you talk about government being bad at it, government is actually the cause for many of these problems, but not only what you talk about, because there's so much that is in the commons. The government is in charge of 80% of the land in the West, approximately.
Correct.
And because of that, no one's in charge. And when they do take charge, they do it poorly. Unfortunately, being involved in Pacific Legal Foundation, we see the horrible abuses of all of these agencies whose stated purpose is to take care of the environment. But their real goal is to simply stop people from engaging in anything that would allow them to earn a living. And there are many cases where the things that they tell people to do are actually contrary to what you or I would think of as good for the environment. It's all about control. It's all about power. And I think that's the thing we need to realize, that it's not about the stated goal.
I think the thing that we need to remember here is that the hard environmental left, I'm talking about the Earth Firsters and the Environmental Defense Fund, people like that, Sierra Club. These are people who are saying, hey, the evidence is not necessarily, internally, they're saying the evidence is not necessarily 100% in our favor, so we need to shut up our opponents because we've got a good thing going here. We're getting a whole lot of government grants by doing environmental research. We're able to keep our nonprofits in the tall grass by doing environmental scare stories about carbon dioxide, et cetera. We need to keep this scam going, and the only way we can do it is if we shut up our opposition. So they are actually prosecuting, attorney generals in several states are actually prosecuting Exxon for funding people who are doing science that would question the global warming myth or the global warming argument. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And to me, what we're looking at is a scientific establishment that is entirely analogous to the medieval scientific establishment. The medieval scientific establishment was the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church said the earth was flat. Galileo said the earth is not flat. And he was his views were made illegal. That's what's happening with the scientific establishment. They're saying to modern-day Galileos, shut up, because you are wrong. We are the establishment. We are the authorities. You have no right to question us who know everything. We are the elite. Go away and take your toys with you. That's what's going on. And that cannot be allowed to stand. Scientific inquiry by its nature opens and basically welcomes a challenge. If you're a true scientist, you look for somebody that can falsify your premise. These people are looking for nobody to challenge their premise, nobody to challenge their theory. And I agree with you that we need to do whatever is necessary, reasonably necessary or rationally necessary to preserve the environment. Now, whether carbon dioxide is a problem or not, I think that's an open question. But certainly all of the other pollutants that we've been able to get out of the air through sensible air restrictions, that's a good thing. The air in California is a hell of a lot cleaner than it was 50 years ago. In the river flowing into the Great Lakes is not starting on fire anymore. That's a good thing. Pollution control is a good thing, but saying that exhaling or otherwise producing carbon dioxide is creating a warmer climate, that's subject to scientific debate. That debate needs to take place.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's not taking place. And
the reason it's not taking place is because the people who are in the ascendancy right now want to stay there and they don't want to be challenged.
Well, and it's follow the money on all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Look, this kind of scare. I wrote a very facetious blog where I proposed that if the government really wanted to, control the minds of the people, then the alien scare is a much better way to go, because the government, the only entities that have powerful enough telescopes to look out far enough to where they could just make stuff up and nobody could prove it. But anybody can measure temperature, and anybody can run statistics that will show that there is no causation statistically between CO2 and temperature rise. There are certainly models that predict it, but none of those models show causation. But if they were to pick the alien scare, none of us have a Hubble. We don't have a Hubble in our backyard to disprove it. So if they really want to go...
With 3D printing, we might be able to make one. Who knows?
Yeah, but how do we get it up there?
A 3-judge panel at the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that the Internet is a utility, I guess sort of like Ma Bell. And they did that in upholding something called net neutrality rules. And what this means, if I'm not mistaken, is more regulation of the Internet on an ad hoc basis by the FCC. That happened after the FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler basically changed his position. He caved into pressure from the Obama administration. Tyler, you got more on that?
Yeah, so basically what the net neutrality is if you look at Internet data like packets, say you're watching, say, a Netflix movie, and it's 10 packets long, right? You delivers to you. Before it gets sent to you, it gets sent to the IP, your IP provider, internet service provider, and then goes to you. Now, there's other people who are all around the country who are using the same internet service provider that are also going to other websites, whatever website they're at. Now, what the thing was is that websites or your IP internet service provider is able to prioritize who gets the data first. So say if you're a Netflix user, you can maybe pay a little bit more and make sure that your Netflix movie doesn't get interrupted, while somebody who's browsing the Huffington Post, maybe their data will be a little bit slower and they're getting their packets a little bit later. So what the regulation was meant to do was supposed to go in there and make it so that way everyone gets everything equally. It's like socialism. So basically, if you're watching your Netflix channel...
So it's really price controls on the Internet.
Yes,
in effect.
Absolutely. It was a price control, and it was meant so that way
everybody gets the same price.
Yeah.
Whether you're buying in bulk or buying onesies and twosies, everybody gets the same price.
Yeah. In all honesty, why does it matter that if my neighbor is watching Netflix and I'm browsing some kind of blog, I don't need to use up as much data as he does. I don't need to prioritize my data I don't want to interrupt their movie just for me to go look up a cooking recipe or something like that. You know, it's not that it's not affecting me who's using less data versus them who's using more data. It's okay for them to prioritize them more and give them more data.
It's really difficult to talk about this without really getting into the weeds on how the internet works, which is something I don't really understand and very few people do. But I think if you think of it in conceptual terms, what the FCC has done is said, okay, we're going to regulate it like a utility. What we're going to do is tell internet providers that if they want to do something that improves service for some of their best customers, we'll let them propose it, and then we'll give permission or not. So they are setting themselves up as the arbiters as to whether exceptions can be made on net neutrality. They're awarding themselves huge amounts of monopoly power in the internet space. Once that happens, the internet doesn't have to be in the United States. The internet can occur anywhere. Once that happens, internet providers are going to migrate overseas where they are not as highly and inefficiently regulated and provide service from Vladivostok or from wherever.
To clarify, this is by providing internet. And so even if they establish your business overseas, they still have to follow U.S. regulations in order to do business in the U.S. Simply by doing business in the U.S. as an ISP. And starting an ISP company is actually relatively easy. You can be a small business and actually start your own internet service provider company. Thing is, you usually have to go choose a larger upline like Comcast or AT&T, and that's what you call as your upline. So basically, you're just siphoning off their data and reselling it under your business. Now, this is actually going to affect small businesses because you can be a small business who's using Comcast or AT&T as your upline provider to sell to your customers, and all of a sudden now you're being regulated. Whereas before, it was only targeted to go to the large corporations who can handle these regulations. Now it's attacking small businesses because there's small businesses that can get into this industry.
In short, what's happening is the Obama administration has said we want more power over the internet, and we're going to get it by forcing equality on pricing.
And the biggest problem is that
unless we say otherwise,
once the government has the ability to influence the pipeline, in other words, how much data can go, they can manage the pipeline, and they can make sure that the enemies of the state, if
get really slow connections,
get less access to data, they can make sure that their message gets through more easily, that their favored chosen few have the best access, and then it'll go. I mean, there's recently someone, and a conspiracy theorist, because I tried a few of them, that said that Google's search engine was biased toward liberals and against conservatives, and gave some examples, some search terms. And I tried it. You can write an algorithm if you're Google and control so much of the search that will influence the results when somebody asks for political news. And I think on any of the popular websites right now, you're seeing the effects of that. If you go to any of the websites, any of the news sites, you're going to see that, in Trump's case, bless his little heart, is what they say to people in the South. If you have mental issues, bless your heart. Any story that comes up on Trump, and the top 5 or 6 stories listed on any of the news websites, any popular websites, is a negative story. There's nothing positive at all. Positive stories exist, but are they being seen? No. Whereas, even look at the pictures that are chosen. So we're already seeing the liberal status quo bias in, I think, some of the algorithms that pick news stories. This is even worse, because now the pipeline that those messages come now will fall under the FCC, and pretty soon that messaging is going to be influenced.
So, do keep in mind that you're seeing a lot of negative stories about Trump because that's actually is trending, and it does sort out.
But you're not seeing very many. The example I think you were referring to, not that many negative stories about Hillary Clinton, even if you put in Hillary Clinton is a liar or something like that.
So the case you're talking about, and I saw the video, was that if you type in Hillary Clinton CRI, it'll say criminal report or a law that she passed a few years ago not criminal investigation. Whereas if you go to Bing or Yahoo, it'll automatically fill in criminal investigation. So that's where you're talking about where it's biased. And it makes sense for them to be biased for Hillary Clinton because Hillary Clinton is the more bribable candidate.
More bribable, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a lot harder to
But I
bribe Trump.
typed
He's
in
already
Hillary
doing it.
Clinton a lie, and the first thing that came up was library. So I suspected that it might not be a fair playing field.
Well, it might be just for her. I don't think they do that to older resource. I mean, it's possible that they could be filtering out everything, but I think it's just for her specifically that this particular election, which they have technically a right to do so because they are a private entity.
Right.
But they are not seen as they are seen as an objective purveyor of information. And once people find out that they're guiding people to not objective choices, they're going to go somewhere else. They're going to use another search engine rather than a Google. Yeah.
Moving on to one more topic. The Marist Poll has said that 49% of the population, this is the entire U.S. population, favors legalizing prostitution, 44% oppose. You've expressed doubts about that, John. Why is that?
Well, no, I love that poll. I disagree based upon some nonprofits I'm involved in and some research I've done that prostitution, as it stands in this country right now, is victimless. As it stands. Now, legalization will make it a victimless operation. The internet has improved prostitution for prostitutes in that it's gotten rid of the pimps, because anybody can run an ad now locally. What these girls do now is they run ads for out-call escort services, and they move from place to place, and the pimps don't control the internet, so that they can operate without the pimp, so they're making more money, they're not beat up, and all the rest of that stuff. There's already some improvement at some level, at a slightly higher level of prostitutes. Street prostitutes still have a problem. If it was legalized, then as any other provision of service, if they were to agree to provide a certain service to you, the chances of them being beaten and robbed providing a legal service, somebody skimming 70% of their profits, are much smaller. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think this is a good poll. I'd like to see it happen. I'd like to see prostitution legalized in this country.
That's the show this week. We'll see you again next week. Same time, same place on the Libertarian Counterpoint, on the web at accesssacramento.org, on YouTube, and on cable channels all over the place. We'll see you again next week. Thank you very much for being part of the show.